Welcome to the three-part series, Go from Reactive to Fully Proactive with Graylog. We designed this series because these days we're all stretched. Log data is expanding in volume and complexity. To keep pace, most people are working in a reactive mode. We're going to walk you through how to become fully proactive so you can get that time back in your day. Hello, I'm Jeff Darrington, the Senior Technical Marketing Manager for Graylog. Welcome to this three-part Graylog series. Go from reactive to fully proactive with Graylog. In this first series, we'll be talking about going from search to alerts and notifications. We will look at starting with a problem or an issue found potentially in your network and how to augment alerts with correlation to get the most value out of your alerts, to remove the noise and ensure you have alerts worthy of immediate response or potential actions. To start, everything you do in Graylog starts with search. Search is where we start to ask questions and explore. This is also the most common place that you have been asked to look when there's issues going on in the network or otherwise, and a more reactive approach. You might also just be exploring your logs. Depending what chair you sit in, you might be in IT operations, monitoring performance of a network or locked in or users accounts and answering help desk tickets. Or you might be a security operations team, monitoring for threats and searching for indicators of compromise. You might also be DevOps, monitoring your code spin for errors or monitoring the performance of your latest applications. Let's explore and search where any of these teams would benefit from the data gathered from all their systems. From search, we will find specific information that will allow us to build a filtered and aggregated alert. We will charge up this alert to a correlation alert. This correlation alert will create a very mature, methodical, and valuable alert that could be used to wake up the on-call teams in response or have that 24/7 SOC team react within moments. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to get into a search, and the search I'm going to get into is regarding user accounts. It's very common to keep an eye on user accounts and credentials, and it's also a really good way to just sample some data inside Graylog, look at what's going on in your network with users. So let's look at this instance of Graylog. And what we're going to do is, in this example, we have a bunch of Windows clients or Windows endpoints, and we want to look at failed logins. So this event code 4625 is the event code for failed login. So we're going to have a quick look. And as you see, if we do a straight search for this event code, you do see quite an extensive list of failed logins. Now, it's also pertinent that the failed logins is not over a very large extended time. If you look at the date range, you're looking at the date being the 16th, and rolling down here, there still seems to be quite a few on the 16th with some incremental times. So what we're going to do to get a good view of this is message count shows the date range here. So what we want to do is we want to get a little deeper into the data. So I'm actually going to create a widget, and building a widget from an aggregation will give the ability for you to save it as a search or export it as a dashboard and or save it to your team for an investigation. So we're going to edit this, and what we're going to do is we want to add some rows to a data table. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to add the event code. The event code is what we already talked about, which was the 4625. We're also going to add the Graylog normalized field called GL2 underscore event type. Okay, this gives you the normalized login failure message. You know exactly what that message is. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to add the event source. The event source shows the actual source name itself, the host name. And we're also going to add to this the user underscore name in the field. This will give you the user accounts that are being used, or a user account. In this case, there's two, user 10 and user are the user accounts that are trying to log into these hosts. Now, to get a better view as to what's really going on, now you need to understand the time frame that it's occurring. So we're going to add the timestamp. What this will do is show the timestamp over time of this event. So what we're going to do is save it. I'm going to extend this out to get a little bit better view of what's going on. Now you can see the host name desktop here with the username and how many different times it tried to fail to log in. Also with user to that host name. And now we have an additional host with this particular user, test user 10, who has failed multiple times. So this data is fairly valuable. What I am going to do is save it as a search. I'm going to call this user login failure, INV for investigation, for example. And I'm going to create it. And now it's been saved. But what I can actually do here is share this. And what I can do is share it to the teams that are mapped in Active Directory to the individual teams that I've built in the system. So what I'm going to do before I do that is I want to add a little bit more information here so that depending on what team's getting this, perhaps it's going to go to the firewall team or whatnot. I'm going to edit this again, and I'm going to add the source IP address. Now you've got the IP addresses or address, as you can see, that's been involved in this. So now what I can do is I'm going to save it, this same save search, and now we've got this search saved, and I'm going to share it. Need be, I can grab this link, share this out to the team through a instant message through Teams, Slack, or whatever platform, or you can go in and set it up to share it, and it will connect via an email and give a notification. Now what I'm going to do, we talked about that basic search. So that was the manual way of going into a search and looking at finding users with event codes and different things and expanding your search. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you to a dashboard, which is an Illuminate dashboard to expedite being able to find out more information on that particular user. So let's move over here to the instance. What I'm going to do is go into dashboards, and what I want to do is go into an account investigation drill down. So this will bring up a parameter, and this is what's called parameterized search. This parameter that I want to use in this instance is going to be the test user that we talked about earlier in the search. We've already narrowed this down. This actual dashboard could be used by anyone or a higher level security team, depending on how you want to set up your processes in your environment. So what I'm going to put in here is test user 10. And we're going to look at what shows up for all of these components within the dashboard. And I'm going to extend this timeout just due to my data that I'm sending and putting into the system. We're going to look, we see no processes created or endpoint activity over time. We don't see any network activity, so that's good. In the alerts page, we don't really see any alerts or any signatures or anything going on with the account. In the summary, now we've broken this down and we're seeing access attempts over time. So if this was a user that actually had exposed a host and got logged into it, and say they wanted to copy some data off, back on this network tab, this is where you would see the bytes over time that were being transferred from this machine to a destination. At least you would know at this point that this host potentially was attacked or utilized in a way you probably don't want. And the summary tab is giving you the events and logins over time. The other thing that's happening is the geolocation of where the individual is logging in from and giving you the actual information. The user authentication access tab is the logon time and count over time, failed users. Here is an indication where this user tried to log in 216 times. If you see this one user trying to log in and fail 216 times, but the successful user attempts goes to 1, now you know these other dashboards or these other items you need to look at. Someone has attempted to log in 216 times, and for example, the 17th time, they have now logged in.
Now, to recap where we've gone, we've started with a search, the criteria being failed logins, and found a questionable amount of failed logins, narrowed down to a host and the usernames used. And we've gone into a parameterized dashboard and utilized test user 10, which was one of the users who had excessive amount of bad logins or failed logins. And we were able to see much more valuable information in that particular dashboard utilizing the parameterized search. The parameterized search being that you're basically looking for, in this instance, a given field for the username. This could be any field. Could be a field that you're utilizing something on a web server or anything querying a constant variable in a investigation type thing, or when you want to keep an eye on different types of events in your network and it's always the same type of event and you know you can get quickly drilled into it. Moving forward with the same theme of failed logins, we're going to look at a set of event definitions. Windows logon successful and excessive failed logon event definitions. These will cascade into a correlation event. So let's bring up our instance. And what we're going to do is we're going to look into our alerts and go and define our event definitions. And in the event definitions, we're going to start with Windows logon success. Here with this event definition, we're looking for Windows event codes specific to login success. So we've created a filter and aggregation of the Windows event code 4624. We are looking in a stream. We're looking in this Windows security event log messages. We're also going to search within the last minute and execute every minute. So this will be a fairly frequent search. In the fields area, for this particular one, we are going to look for the username and we're going to make that a key. And we're going to look in the configuration with the string source.user_name. This will have the configured information to know what's going on in that alert or in that event definition. The notifications, we're not building a notification on this. If you were going to log and notify for every successful login, obviously that would create a lot of noise and very unnecessary noise. The only instance you might be looking at if there was a high secure area or something where you had to know when someone logged into a given host. And you could tailor this to a specific host and specific usernames or a specific scenario like this. But in this case, we just want to know of this event. Now, looking at this event definition, we will now move to an excessive failed logon attempt. So this definition is set up called excessive Windows logon failures. And we're going to go in and we're going to create a filter and aggregation. We scroll down here, a failed login attempt is a Windows event code 4625. We are looking at the streams again for the Windows security event log messages. We're going to search every minute and execute every minute on this search of this Windows event code in the logs. We're going to set up in the event an aggregation of the results that reach a threshold. We're going to group by the field user_name, which would be typically the user login name. As we go and create events for the definition, we're going to look down here and add some counts or some math to this. So this particular field count will look to be greater than the threshold of 5. So you could tailor this or tune this to potentially what you might have already in your authentication setup for your given domain or what you've got set up. You might have locked out accounts might kick in after 6 or 8 or could be less. Either way, this event, for the sake of this demonstration, we're utilizing a threshold of 5. The next thing we're going to look at is the fields. We're going to add the host name and the username to that event so we know what user and what host was attempted to be logged in. And you're going to see these in these strings. So if we edit one of these, you're inserting the template field source.hostname. And we're also going to look at the individual fields for username. So we know the username. We're not setting up a notification for this one as of yet. You could set up a notification. However, any bad attempts, would you want to know about bad attempts all the time, like successful logins? Clearly, that could get potentially noisy depending on what your environment's like. If you had a lot of service accounts, some might have bad passwords. Someone changes a password by mistake. Now you're going to start firing off a whole bunch of alerts constantly. So the next event we want to look at is a correlation. So a correlation, we're going to call this potential brute force success. A brute force success obviously is a bunch of failed login attempts for a given user or username, and then following it, a successful login. So what we're going to do is take these last two events that we created and we're going to combine them. So those first two events we just looked at, by themselves, they are enough of information to understand what's going on with each other or the individual alert. Here you're going to see how you're going to take those two together, and you're going to realize that event correlation now totally changes the concept of how you're going to use these messages. So in event correlation, we're going to create the correlation so that the sequence of events must be satisfied within 5 minutes. We're going to execute every minute. The first event we're going to look at is the excessive amount of logins. So we're going to watch for the successful amount of logins. This should happen at least 5 times in this configuration. Then the second event is the Windows login success. And we want this to happen at least 1 time. So in this, we're going to include some fields. We want to know a lot of information in this because if someone failed quite a number of amount of times and then had an instant success with their login, we want to know the source host name, the source IP, and the username. We're going to add a notification to this, but we're going to do this in a moment. As you can see in the summary of this, we are now including multiple events that will give you valuable information and something that you would need to react to. If you need to react to something, it's best to have those alerts as your primary alert. If you want to be alerted of individual items on a frequent basis, the noise that will generate will be fairly excessive, and it won't be necessarily things that you'll need to react to. This event correlation that we just covered, if this happened in your environment, most, if not all, would for sure want to know about this kind of event. And this would then spawn some type of reaction by a particular security team or processes within your actual organization.
Okay, next what we're going to do is we've already built out those rules for and events for correlation. So we know when we get too many bad attempts followed by a successful login, we want to fire at an alert. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to go and define an actual alert. So I've already got one defined. I'm going to go through and configure this one. I'm calling it possible brute force alert. So I'm going to show you my screen here, and in the configuration, you'll see here, possible brute force alert. So we're going to edit that alert. And what we're going to do is we're going to create it, and it's going to be a Slack notification, as you can see here. I'm using Discord as my destination, and what you'll do, which is in another video on our website, is create a webhook on a channel, and in that webhook, you would paste it in here, and for the configuration in Graylog, you would paste the web URL followed by /Slack. This will forward the webhook appropriately formatted so that you can get the information into Discord. So flowing down here, we'll see the channel is Graylog. The custom message is optional. I've left it default because it's going to send the information that's in my existing messages already. Also below, you'll see the username optional is Graylog. That's the actual channel. And the notify channel checkbox is enabled. Below here, you can test a generic message to make sure that your webhook's working in general before you build out your alerts. I highly recommend testing this to make sure that your generic message will show up in your alert channel prior to testing your actual alerts. It's a good way to know that it's actually working. And then in here, we next need to go in and go into the potential brute force success event definition, which is used in the notification for the correlation. And we need to go into the notifications and we need to add this possible brute force notification alert. So it's already added here, but what you would do without this here is click add notification, drop down and add possible brute force alert, say okay, and it's ready to go. Now that it's ready to go and you've got the potential for some events that are kicking in and bad logins are happening or failed logins are happening, followed by one successful login triggering your events, then you'll see the alert. So this alert is the one we built, and we're indicating the name of the event, the time of the event. The key was the test user 10 we talked about, the timestamp, and also the username and the source where it came from. Let's recap where we've been. So far, we created a search to find failed and successful login attempts. We've created event definitions for those events. We've even taken event correlations, which charges up your alerts and prepares you for high fidelity alerts. We sent alert notifications of this correlation that we built and sent it to Discord. So guess what? You've now gone from reactive to proactive in Graylog. You're no longer searching for those events manually. Graylog is doing it on your behalf and notifying you when it occurs. Thanks for joining us at the Go from Reactive to Fully Proactive in Graylog with session 1. Let's get to the Q&A. Okay, everyone, let me just set up a few slides here, and I will share out my screen here. Okay, so we've got some questions in the chat window. Please don't hesitate to put any comments or suggestions in the chat window. We definitely take any feedback and use that towards any new demos that we might be doing. If there's something in the demo that you did not see that you wish you could have seen, please just throw that right in the chat window, and we'll make sure that we bring it into the next demos that we're doing or into the next series. There's a couple questions here regarding not directly tied into the demo, but definitely questions regarding some of the different things I was using. I noticed you were using some of the Elluminate content in your demo. What other sources of Elluminate content do you have that is not in the demo? So in the demo, I did use some Office 365 and some Windows events. What else that we have in here is Palo Alto and Okta. Our Windows events are quite extensive, and as of 1.6, we released an extensive parsing set of rules and correlations and whatnot with Sysmon. So if you're utilizing Sysmon in your environments, everyone knows Sysmon is a very powerful tool in monitoring endpoints, and the Sysmon will highlight a lot of things. You can utilize that to find hash values and modifications of files for searching for IOCs and bad DNS hosts and a bunch of different things, and correlate a lot of good security events together. There's a couple questions here. A question from Brandon. Any chance the dashboard used will be shared? Shared in what way? Throw another question there, Brandon. Would you like it shared to the team? Or are you referring to how that dashboard is created? The dashboard that we had a couple different things in there. We had the dashboard for searching for a username in the parameterized dashboard. Just shoot another question there specifically of how you wanted it shared or how to get that so I can understand what you might need. Could you please share the demo link? Yes, for sure, we will provide that. I understand there might have been a couple people that had some audio problems over the demo. I apologize for that. I'm hoping we can definitely get the demo link so you can get that played out and perhaps get some questions sent our way. There is a question from Thomas. What other collaboration software can these be sent to, i.e. WebEx, Teams, Discord? So right now, let me bring up my demo unit. Let's see, let's go to alerts, notifications, and here is where we've got the types for notifications. So currently we have integration with PagerDuty. So if you're utilizing PagerDuty, we can send messages there. Slack notification, which when you use Discord, like I used in the demo, you actually build a Slack notification as I explained in the demo. There's a really short feature video for that. And all you're doing in the Slack notification when you want to use Discord is you create the webhook for it and you insert that in the link, but then you format it with a /Slack at the end, and that will create that Discord alert so as a Slack message so Discord understands it. There's enterprise script notifications, and stay tuned for some of the other sessions, sessions 2 and 3, because we're going to cover some other notifications other than Slack or Discord, and we're going to fire off some enterprise scripts. So enterprise scripts can be done a variety of different things you could do with enterprise scripts. I had one in the background doing a live demo one day where I was playing an audio file just for the sake of showing that you can kick off something. So when the event happened, it was playing the DEF CON 5 sound, so you could hear it in the background during my demo. That was just a, an example. Scripts can be used to basically do anything you like. If you're running Python or different types of scripts, you can utilize them. And of course, email notifications. You can do HTTP notifications as well to a web server. I'm gonna start getting through the questions here. We have a question from Eric. When you define multiple event fields in an event definition, it adds them all as one single value piped for key field and a JSON for the other field. Is there any way to create multiple individual field value pairs that are more easily searchable? That's a good question. So there's a way to do that slightly differently rather than correlation. You can group searches, which will have independent groups that you can actually search in combination together. So it is definitely a different way of doing searches. Correlation is multiple. You can have multiple layers, obviously. We only showed 2 here. But you could have 2 or 3, 4 different types for very specific events. But grouping your searches as groups, that's where this would come into play. That is a really good question, and I would love to get more information to you directly on that, because you're asking a very technical question I want to provide you a solid answer on. So what I would need to do is just think through that a little bit and provide you answers to that, Eric. That's a really good question. So I'm going to note that with the team, and we're definitely going to get some information back to you. There's a question here from Joseph. Can we download the content pack for the dashboards you displayed? So the dashboards that displayed are part of Illuminate, which is the enterprise content spotlights. So to get those dashboards, you do have to have enterprise versions of Graylog. So that's how those dashboards are distributed. So when you get enterprise, you'll automatically get access to all of those dashboards. As an example, you'll see a variety of Illuminate core dashboards, Palo Alto dashboards, Sysmon dashboards, and a bunch of others in here with Windows Authentication, Windows Identity Access Management, and Sysmon drill downs. So you'll see them in here. There's a question here from Daniel. Any experience with sending notifications from Graylog to Zabbix? No, I have not, but that would be interesting. I would love to know what type of interface you can send to in Zabbix. I think that would be something we could very easily pull off with a combination of either a web push or an email notification. I'm not familiar with the application, but it's definitely something, it's pretty rare to not find the ability to send something via a web push or a notification through a script, an enterprise script. Not knowing that application well enough, there are definitely interfaces that you can send information to. I would imagine there's also an API connection to it. Almost a lot of applications now are allowing you to get API connections with tokens, so you can have secure connections to applications to be able to push data. So that might be another way we could do that. Love to definitely know more about Zabbix for sure. Brandon asked a question about the dashboard being available in the Graylog Marketplace. No, that dashboard is not in Marketplace. That's because it is part of the enterprise content. So it's part of the enterprise purchase. There's a question here from Ignis. Why, let me have a look here. Why Graylog does not make rule packages with any signatures from attacks? Something like an IDS IPS Graylog since the COVID health crisis. Yes, I hear you on the COVID crisis. Cybersecurity truck suspicious actions. So stay tuned for some upcoming information. In 4.1, we just released an interface to Greynoise. That's G-R-E-Y noise, Greynoise, not G-R-A-Y. There's a variety of things coming down the pipe, and a lot of customers right now are actually receiving logs from IDS and IPS. And we're able to basically take those logs and create that correlation. So from a log management perspective, if the IDS and IPS is set up in such a way, and you've got your, let me pull this up really quick. Under our lookup tables. There's a variety of different types of enterprise content for ransomware domains, open threat exchange with DNS entries and bad IP host names. So we can set up lookup tables to look up DNS entries and hosts and be constantly querying them for any data that's going outbound. And you can actually link that to a threat map so that you actually can create your own lookup table and GeoIP map to show you where the bad destinations are going and give yourself a dashboard. So there is existing content that you can have this type of activity, but in a real deep rooted IDS IPS direct, we are not an IDS IPS. However, if we're receiving threat intel, like I just noted here with the Open Threat Exchange and different things, I worked on actually setting up this NIST CVE lookup. So I connected to the API at NIST and I was able to query CVEs. So you could actually pull them right into Graylog. So there's a ton of things you can do with external sources and use them as lookup tables. There's another question here from Noah. Are the queries that you ran out-of-box queries, or would the queries need to be configured during deployment? So the queries were based on the Windows events that we have defined in the Illuminate content. If you're receiving logs from, I'm going to use examples because I use Windows in this case. If you're using logs from a Windows endpoint and you're utilizing, for example, winlog beat, and you've defined the winlog beats, or excuse me, the beats input, you can run those queries based on those log events coming in. So I did a basic text search for that reason. That search text can be found within the generic log event names. So that's why I use that search as a very minimalized search. I didn't get into a long string. I wanted it as a text search so that you could understand and see that, putting the most simplest text search in will give you results right away. And you're able to actually look at those raw logs. And then if you wanted to, with the demo that I did, you can add additional things to it. For example, if you knew you wanted to watch that file server or something in your premise and you wanted the search to be logons or changes to files on that server, then you can actually implement that and do it in the actual search. But I tried to keep the search very minimal so that you could see if you're receiving Windows event and security logs, you're going to see that event show up in that data. There's a question here. Let's see. Richard's got two questions here. Can you walk me through filter search query for SSH Linux? Interesting. That's a good question. And the reason why is I actually built in my system a while ago. I was trying to do some correlation alerts with my Linux server. And what I wanted to do was create a notification when someone SSH to my Linux server successfully. And I'm using syslog. So what I want to do is make it generic so that I could receive RFC 5424, which is the standardized protocol for RFC. Protocol 23 format was the original name. So what I actually did, which I don't know if I have enough data in here at the moment because I haven't been logging in, but I have a SSH daemon login failed, SSH login successful. And my correlation, what I wanted to do was, if I saw someone log in but did not log out with a predetermined amount of time, in this case, I think it was 15 minutes, then I want to be triggered so that if someone's SSH'd into the box, I want to know why they're in there longer than 15 minutes. So this correlation actually was based on two events. I called it SSH opened and SSH closed. And the reason why I did that was it was specific to after the authentication. The authentication had taken process already and the session opens. You get more valuable information in that. So if I go back to my event definitions under session opened and I show this, I created a search because I'm utilizing authentication. This was my actual search. I'm looking on a couple of things because I wanted to see the application name in the syslog to be the SSH daemon. And I wanted to see in the message, Pam_Unix SSHD session opened. So you'll see in the raw logs, and you can actually query that very specifically in the logs, The difference with this message and the second one is session closed. So those two events occurred. And what I did in my event definition for, where is it? Open too long. I basically created the correlation that looked at the session open, and it had to be within 16 minutes of session open and session closed. If not, include the username. And in the notification, I sent a Slack notification to let me know that someone's been logged into the server much longer than they should have been. Or in this case, I wanted to just got to find a ballpark somewhere with a notification, and you know, dreaming up notifications to try to just holistically show a flow through of a correlation. This is one that I used a couple of different times, so it works pretty good. Obviously, it might not be in your environment that you might use this one, but okay, let's get to some more questions here. We have a ton of questions. There is a question here from Renew. Please show how we can open dashboard, otherwise means first enter username before open dashboard. Let me see here. So I did a demo. Let me think if I have the data in this instance. So what I'm going to do is put in, for example, I think I know what you're asking me. So we know by the alerts we had earlier, it was test user 10. So this is where string text search becomes very valuable within Graylog, because you don't have to have a big, long, enhanced search to search on something specific. So I am doing this live, so hopefully it does search. I'm looking for data that I might not still have in my Graylog instance, but we'll just check it out here. So test user 10 was a search, and it just showed up with all of the events specific to test user 10. So in my play data, I'm showing the Kerberos authentication tickets that are kicking off. We're seeing authentication failures for a group. There's a bunch of WinLog events that are occurring in this data. I'm hoping this is what you wanted to see, Renew. This event here, when you start building out widgets and looking at searches, like for example, if I see this device name, Michael Precision, so I can roll down here to this source, and I can highlight this value and add it to the query, and then just keep building this out. And I'm only going to see the events coming from these hosts or this in this query. So as you build this out, you can also enable parameterized dashboards. So if you wanted the username, or if you wanted to, in 4.1, you wanted to set up a drop-down list from multiples. So for example, a username and a server name. So if you had a host name where you wanted to watch a user and a server integration, you could filter the logs based on the actual user credential and a specific server. So that's another way you can do that. Hopefully that answers your question. Sanjeev, you have a good question here. Is there a way to save as for events and notifications? This has been a real pain as a point as I create variations with event definitions. So I think you're referring to in your events. I'm pretty sure I know what you are. If I'm wrong by answering this question, please throw another question in the chat window. Under events, if you wanted to export this, is that what you're asking, Sanjeev? If you want to, oh, I understand now. You want to create variations. Okay, so duplicates or copies. Let me think here. I don't believe there is. That is an excellent feature request. So for example, if you had 10 events that were very similar, but you just had to modify slightly little different things for each event, you wanted to be able to duplicate those very quickly. There's probably a way through the API to do that directly as well. I will make note of that. That is actually a really good feature to be able to copy event definitions. There is some things you'd probably have to be careful when copying event definitions, because if they were live event definitions, you copy them, you could fire off a tremendous amount of events or alerts. So there'd need to be a mechanism of doing that in such a way that wouldn't create a lot of issues with it. Perhaps disabling an event notification and presenting you the option to copy it. That's a good question though. I will definitely follow up with the team. That actually is a really good feature request. We're getting close to the end here. I'm going to try to answer a couple more questions here. Question from Brandon, is there a webinar available that covers lookup table configuration and use? My implementation of DX with the proper APK does not appear to be generating results. So if you can make it to the next couple more sessions regarding this series, we are definitely going to cover enrichment of data, and that becomes a portion of that. So Brandon, I'd love to see you back at one of our other sessions. That's definitely going to be a portion of what we're going to cover with lookup tables. So please stay tuned for that. There is a question here from Lewis. Do you have WinLogBeat sending logs to Graylog from every client, or are the events forwarded to a DC first? So that's a good question, because strategies on sending WinLogBeat logs into Graylog, if you have 1,500 or 2,000 or who knows how many endpoint clients that you need to administer, obviously administering that many endpoints and their configuration so you can limit what logs come into Graylog or expand what logs you want to come into Graylog can be tricky. A lot of people in heavy Windows environments will install a Windows log server and let it manage those logs and have WinLogBeat send all of the logs from it to Graylog so that you can centrally manage your clients. Other ways people are doing that with PowerShell scripts and group policy to manage those configuration files, so that every time someone logs into the network, that group policy kicks off and updates that potential WinLogBeat configuration so that it changes how it's configured to communicate. The DC, typically, you wouldn't forward events to the DC. If anything, your domain controller, depending on how you have all those set up, you'd want your domain controller logs being sent to Graylog. A variety, depending on how your domain controllers are set up with DHCP and different things and DNS, you might have them spread out in your applications. That's some of the most high value logs, is getting things from your domain controllers, getting Azure AD, for example. If you're using Office 365, we have a really solid, large enterprise spotlight for O365. If you're utilizing the E5 license pack or license tier, Azure AD logging is included in the Office 365, so you'll get all of your audit logs and everything coming into Graylog. And there's a question here from Charles. Is it possible to replay event rules on a past log? So not directly inside Graylog. There are ways of finding the events, exporting the events, and then you can actually in a script like in curl or in Python or a variety of other tools, sending a Guelph message in, so you can actually duplicate that message and you can use it as basically a dartboard to practice all the time, setting those events in and watching them occur. That's actually a good way to set up alerts when you want to do that. So okay, so it looks like we are running out of time. I'd like to just cover off a quick couple things. I shared out the links to our social media channels, and as you can see at the top here, our next sessions, July 7th and 14th. July 7th, parameterized dashboards, and July 14th, we're going to have Teams permissions, data enrichment, and reports. We had a question about that earlier. Thanks for your question on that regarding lookup tables and enrichment. Stay tuned for that one. Please go ahead and register for these extra sessions. We'd love to see you out there to catch these new sessions. Follow us on our social media channels and get updates as to new things that are coming out, new additions to Marketplace or changes in our application coming out. We just released 4.1 last week, so please check that out. If you want to talk to someone or send feedback or any information regarding today's webinar, please don't hesitate to reach out to info@graylog.com, send us an email, or fill out the contact sales form that was sent to you in the link provided. Really like to thank you for joining us today. And as always, happy logging with Graylog and have a great day. We hope to see you at the next sessions. Thanks again.